All right, so we got the last video today. Another episode of This Weekend in Football, our weekend picks. We got 3 games for you today, 2 in the NFL and the national championship. Of course, in college, Michigan and Washington. We're actually going to split in all 3 of these games, which I think that's definitely the first time this has happened this
That's
season.
first.
Yeah, so this will be interesting, but it probably makes for a better video anyway. So I'm going with Michigan in this one. I know I just picked against them. Against Alabama. So that's probably partially why. But my gut feeling is I was going to pick Washington in this one, and I think it's probably like an easier pick to say Washington would win because it's like, look, obviously Texas isn't as good as Michigan, right? And we know what Texas did to Bama early in the season, so like let's not compare there, even late in the season. But Texas obviously isn't as good as Michigan. Washington is not going to be able to just completely run up and down the field on Michigan's defense. And that's kind of my rationale here. Like, there's no scenario to me where Washington would score less than 20 points in this game. Like, that's just not going to happen. But my thing is, I feel like I would, I was leaning towards Washington, but I'm just like, nah, I don't think Michigan's defense is going to be able to get more stops. Like, if you compare, like running back wise, obviously, they're both good running backs. Dylan Johnson, Blake Corum, both great. Um, Receiving, obviously, I would still lean Washington. Quarterback, definitely, I would lean Washington. But team wise, I think Michigan defensively, probably is going to get the edge here, and I think they're more capable of getting stops and possibly getting turnovers. I just like this one's really tough, to be honest with you. And as much as I would like to see the story of Washington winning, I think it's just more likely that Michigan's going to get the dub. So I'm sticking with that one. But right now, I'm going to say it's probably going to be 34-31 Michigan. Because Michigan's going to have to score points to be able to beat Washington. Simple as that.
Yeah, this is good. A tough game. This is one of the best offenses we've seen against another extremely high performing offense with a pretty solid defense behind it. Washington's defense not as solid. So obviously in shootout situations, this could get ugly for Washington because they're less likely to get a stop than Michigan. But I also think that the sheer force of Washington's offense is a little hard to overcome, even as a pretty good defense. And I'm not, Michigan's defense is good. They've had some pretty standout performances. Not to obviously Iowa and Penn State aren't like the cream of the crop of offense, but I mean they shut them down, held Penn State to 15. So there's some shining things there. Even in other games where you have these big overpowering offenses, they held Ohio State Ohio State scored 24, but Michigan was able to put up 30 and get a win. Alabama scored 20, but they scored 27 and got the win. Maryland give them a fight. They put up 24. Michigan still was able to put up 31 and take the victory here. So Michigan is obviously a super tough opponent. I just feel in this one that the Huskies are rolling. Michael Penix has had a great season. I think I've picked against them a few times. It didn't work, and it wasn't a good choice. I have not picked against Michigan too many times. I don't think that we've had them on here. This may be the first or second, but I do feel that Washington is going to be able to come out and get the edge in this one. And I actually, this is not to be petty in my picks. I would actually take Washington in this one, probably 34-31. I just flipping the score a bit. I think that these two teams are both able to score a lot. I mean, if not, we could see a 37-31 anywhere around that. Washington has not really had a game where they've done anything convincing on defense. I think there's no way that Michigan doesn't put up a lot of points. Washington has just been able to outscore their opponents. They've had super convincing games against Oregon. As a matter of fact, their win against Oregon in the Pac-12 title was 34-31. Then they turned around and allowed 31 to Texas. So I think that we're going to see a similar score here. Washington's offense just being able to eke out a narrow victory. I would not be upset if Michigan won this, but I would really like to see Michael Penix Jr. Get himself a natty before it's all said and done. So, yeah. Going from there, we're going to jump into the NFL. Obviously, that game there had a lot of weight. That is the national championship. These two games that we're picking tonight here also have a pretty good deal of weight as far as the playoffs. We talked about this in our previous videos about who's getting in, who's getting out. It really depends on these two games right here. The first one being the Colts versus the Texans, and we are going to split. I am going to take the Texans in this one. The Colts have been a really good team this season. Both these teams 9-7. The Colts a little less young with Michael Pittman, Zach Moss, and Gardner Minshew. They have had some pretty good fiery seasons here. Obviously, Anthony Richardson went down, and it seemed like things might be a little bleak. But Gardner came in and has played some pretty good football. They have mirrored each other in their last 5 games. Both these two teams going win, loss, win, loss, win. So they've kept themselves alive at the same pace. But with CJ Stroud being healthy in this game, even if he's not fully there, I think that there's a bit of an edge as far as quarterback play goes in this one. Not to say anything bad about Gardner this year. He's had a great year. Not even super far behind the year that Stroud has had. I mean, it's below him for sure. Stroud was an MVP candidate for a little while there. But I think with CJ Stroud healthy, with Devin Singletary at full strength, Nico Collins and Tank Dell kind of getting stuff going on. Actually, I think Tank Dell might be gone. But if Robert Woods and Noah Brown can get in there, I think the Texans are going to be poised to have a little bit more of a consistent offensive performance. These two teams have been a little inconsistent as far as that goes, but the Texans' defense has been a huge part of their victories recently. Even in their losses, they have been good. They had some takeaways against Tennessee, stuffed them to a 3-point performance. Even in the loss to Cleveland, the Texans defense still was able to force some turnovers and get some scores. Same thing with the other game against Tennessee. The really baffling performance was just against the Jets, where they lost 30-6. Other than that, the Texans defense has been pretty good. So I think on paper, the Texans have just a slight edge on offense and a slight edge on defense. That's going to be hard. They're going to be in Indianapolis. This would not shock me if the Colts were to win this game. These two teams always play each other pretty close and get to play each other twice a year. But I think the Texans are going to be able to edge out this one and try to get themselves in potentially get themselves into a playoff spot. The Colts have a really great chance to do it. I just think the Texans are going to have a slight edge in this one.
Yeah, Tank Dell, he's been out because of that injury, like at the goal line and everything. So that's obviously been a blow to him in the past month. And the past month and some change, Texans overall kind of cooled down. Obviously, CJ Stroud missed a couple games. Yeah, that game against the Jets, like that's where he got injured. But obviously, before that, they were getting killed. And both teams, honestly, like you said, the last 5 they kind of mirrored each other, and kind of disappointing. Like when you look at their losses, like Cleveland's a good team. So losing to them, like that wouldn't end the world, but they didn't play really well against Cleveland. Um, the Jets game, obviously, for the Texans was horrible. Like there's no other way around it, really. You can talk about the Jets defense all you want, but I mean, my God, 30-6, like that's that's bad. Game before that, they won against Broncos, but wasn't that great of a victory. But they did pull out that win at the end, and that was when the Broncos were on that hot streak. So cool them off. Their only 2 wins over the past month would be the Titans twice, one of them being overtime, then the second time around with CJ. Obviously, like they put them down in that one. Flip side with the Colts, slight win over the Raiders, pathetic against the Falcons, dominating the Steelers after the first 10 minutes basically. Then they got dominated against Cincinnati, which that one I couldn't understand again, and then a slight win over the Titans as well. So they're both teams kind of mirror each other. Like honestly, like you said, like it's hard who to trust in this one. To be honest with you, I was gonna pick Texans again, like the last pick. I was gonna pick the other team, but I just got a feeling like I feel like I can trust the Colts more to show up and play. Like obviously, I would take CJ Stroud over Gardner Minshew, of course, but Gardner Minshew has been pretty good, all things considered. Like what he's been asked to do, and when the Colts, like at their peak, right, I would say Texans are obviously the better team. I would think a better offense, but consistently, I think the Colts are better right now, and they definitely shocked me this season. They've definitely surprised me this season. So, like, if they hadn't have lost, a couple weeks ago, if all those teams hadn't have lost, like halfway through the season, I probably would have said Colts would have been able to get this division. Right when the Jags are going on their losing streak, and the Texans, were starting to falter a bit. So, I'm picking Colts again. This is a reluctant kind of pick. I think it's going to be close again. I'd say 30-27 probably. I just think Colts got a little bit more veteran leadership in there. Both teams still got a bunch of young guys out there, but I think the Colts a little bit more consistent, mostly, I would say. So I think they'll pull this one out, but again, it's not a super confident pick either. And then moving to the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. He's going with the Dolphins. I'm sticking with the Bills in this one. Again, another pick that I was going back and forth with. I don't want to be overreacting to what happened last week with the Ravens. And again, the Bills, I talked about this in the scenario video. Like the Bills, they played the Patriots close, like they did the first time and lost to them. This time they pulled it out. So let's not act like the Bills have been super impressive the past two games. But I think all roads and signs have been pointing towards the Bills getting this victory in this game. And the Dolphins, obviously, now they're feeling the pressure because the Bills, of course, they can miss the playoffs if they lose, depending on what happens in other games. Dolphins, however, you can go from 2 to 6, and they very, very well could have had the number 1 seed had they beaten the Ravens. So I think because of that loss, they're feeling a little bit more pressure in general, despite the Bills having more to lose here. Um, you got guys that are questionable right now, like Jaden Waddle. We'll see what happens with him. Like he's questionable. That's really the main thing. Raheem Achan, like you got some guys out for Miami, you got some guys out for Buffalo. So it's I don't want to say even for the injury report, obviously, but yeah, I feel like it's just signs important towards the Bills. To be honest with you, pulling this one out, they beat the mess out of them early in the season. Ain't happening again. But I think this one will actually be a little bit lower scoring. I would say 20-17 Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Dolphins in this one. That also kind of contingents on either Waddle or Mostert being healthy. I think Tyreek Hill is supposed to be in. If not, if they're missing Waddle and Hill, then this one's over. The Dolphins
Yeah.
can go ahead and say they got the 6th seed. But if Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle's healthy, and then Mostert over Achan. I mean, Achan's had a good season. His best game, of course, was in the Broncos game. But other games like last week, when he's had good performances, it hasn't really amounted to a Dolphins win. I think they need Mostert in this one. Mostert and Achan is a great duo to have, but I believe that the Dolphins have relied on Mostert, especially at the goal line, a lot in this one, in this season. So I think they're going to need to have Mostert alive in this alive. He is alive. They're going to need to have him healthy in this game. But because this is in Miami, I'm going to give it a little bit of an edge to the Dolphins. They're 7-1 at home. The Bills are 3-4 away, which 3-4 is not horrible. Some of that also comes from the early part of the season before they really started to heat up again. They're on a 4-game win streak, of course, against 2 pretty good teams, then 2 pretty mediocre teams. The two mediocre teams also pushed them to the brink, which is another thing that's going to factor in. The Dolphins lost the Titans is baffling and stupid, and that definitely does not help out their case as far as the strength of what they've been able to do this season. They've obviously had big kind of stories around them based on the ability to beat good teams. They beat Dallas, but then they get crushed by Baltimore. They were crushed by Buffalo early on in the season. But because of the home field advantage, I would say that the Dolphins have just been really good at home. They've been able to lock in. And I also do think this is going to be low scoring. I mean, we've seen some pretty high scoring games recently for both these two teams. Not really the Bills. For the Dolphins, they just got down 56-19. I guess you can't really call that one high scoring in their favor. Dallas is a low scoring game for them, 22-20. But 30-0 to the Jets. They put up 27 against the Titans. They allowed 28. Unfortunately, they put up 45 against Washington. They're not putting up 45 against this Bills defense. That's not happening. But I could see, for me, a recent score of the Bills. They lost. They beat the Chargers 24-22. I can see something like that. The mid-20s. Dolphins come out with a narrow victory over their division rival. It could end up sending the Bills out of the playoffs. It also may not. We'll just kind of that'll be determined by the time this game is played. As this is the last regular season game of the season before we start looking ahead a few weeks here to the playoffs. But yeah, I just have a feeling because they're in Miami. If they have Mostert, if they have Hill, the Dolphins are going to want a revenge game. They're going to be mad about getting crushed last week and be mad about getting crushed weeks ago by the same team. So I just think the cards align a little bit to the Bills, and I think they're aware, right? The Bills know that they have to win this game. It's almost AFC East or bust for the Bills. And the Dolphins are aware of that. They're mad about that previous game, and they're going to want to put that to bed and handle their division rival. And it helps that they're going to be in Miami, despite that being in Miami in January. And it's a little different than Miami in August or September or anything like that. But I'm going to go with Miami in this one. Take them in a narrow, 3 to 4 point victory over the Bills.